Good morning and welcome to the December 20th Victim Compensation Board meeting. For those of you in the room that are appearing on a specific agenda item or wish to offer public comment, the microphones at the podium and tables are directional and require that you hold them fairly close to your mouth when speaking to ensure your testimony is captured by our audio equipment. For members and participants who are appearing via Zoom, if you cannot hear the presenter, please use the comment feature to note that, as staff are monitoring the comments in real time. Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Present.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Chair Ravel.
Present.
Thank you and good morning. Item 1 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Brandon Washington, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gauthier.
Good morning. On July 21st of 2021, Brandon Washington filed an application with Cal VCB as an erroneously convicted felon. That application was supplemented on November 9th, 2023. The application is based on his 2013 convictions for assault with a firearm as an aider and abettor, which convictions were vacated in 2020 on direct appeal. In September of 2023, the court granted a motion for a finding of factual innocence pursuant to Subdivision B of Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $231,000, which represents $140 per day for each of the 1,650 days that Mr. Washington was wrongfully imprisoned. Mr. Washington is represented throughout these proceedings by William Wright, and the Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney General Dina Petroshenko.
Thank you, Counsel. We will hear first from Mr. Wright on behalf of Mr. Washington.
Daniel Rep, REPP.
I think the microphone might be off, or possibly a bit.
Switcheroo. Daniel Rep, Daniel Rep, REPP, as in Paul, specially appearing for Mr. Wright today on behalf of claimant. We would like to thank the board for considering this matter. It's been a long time since my client's convictions in 2010. We've read the decision, we agree with it, and we ask the board to adopt the decision as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Rep. Mr. Washington, would you like to address the board? Thank you, Mr. Washington. We hear next from Ms. Petroshenko from the Attorney General's office.
Can you hear me? Excuse me. Hello? 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 I am not muted, but I'm not hearing any response.
Can you hear us?
We can hear
Yes, yes, I can. Excellent. And for my video is not turning on, even though every other time I've done it exactly the same way. Okay, well, in any case, thank you to the board for the invitation to be here. I have also received and reviewed the decision, and I submit on the comments that I previously submitted regarding the amount of compensation due.
Thank you, Counsel. Is there any discussion on this item by the board?
No.
Do I have a motion on item 1?
I move to approve.
Second. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
Counsel, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is the adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Brandon Washington. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 2 is the Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Charles Hurd, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gauthier.
On October 31st of 2023, Charles Hurd filed an application with the California Victim Compensation Board as an erroneously convicted felon, which application was supplemented on November 20th of 2023. The application is based on Mr. Hurd's 2010 convictions for first-degree murder and attempted robbery, which convictions were vacated in 2020 pursuant to a writ of habeas corpus. In March of 2023, the court granted a motion for a finding of factual innocence pursuant to subdivision B of Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and pursuant to that same Penal Code section, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $229,880, which represents $140 per day for the 1,642 days that Mr. Hurd was wrongfully imprisoned. Mr. Hurd is represented in these proceedings by Mark Vermeulen. The Office of the Attorney General is represented by Deputy Attorney Dina Petroshenko. I'd also like to note that in your packet of materials and also posted on the web is the amended proposed decision. The proposed decision was amended following commentary and a response received from Mr. Hurd's counsel and represents clerical errors that were corrected and other changes requested by Mr. Hurd that were made to the extent that the hearing officer agreed with them.
Thank you, Counsel. We'll hear first from Mr. Vermeulen on behalf of Mr. Hurd.
Thank you. Mark Vermeulen on behalf of Mr. Hurd. I have nothing to add. I'll submit on the earlier submissions.
Thank you, Counsel. Mr. Hurd, I assume, isn't present.
Mr. Hurd is not present. He is in federal prison in Beaumont, Texas.
We'll hear now from Ms. Petroshenko from the Attorney General's office.
And thank you again to the board for the invitation. I have reviewed the proposed decision. I agree with the decision regarding the amount of compensation due. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Petroshenko. Is there any discussion on this item by the board?
I just had a quick clarifying question, if that's all right, Chair. So just so I understand, and for the record, the funds, given that the claimant is in serving time in federal prison right now, what happens to those funds? If the award is given, what happens to the funds and how do they flow?
Pursuant to our standard processing procedure, Mr. Hurd's compensation would be submitted to the State Controller's Office for payment. And given that Mr. Hurd is represented by counsel, the payment would be issued to his counsel to then disperse to Mr. Hurd consistent with their agreement.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was my anticipation as well. I will deposit it into my client trust account.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Further clarification on that point. It might be just a very minor detail, but it could be helpful. Will the check be made out to Charles Hurd or to Mark Vermeulen in trust for Charles Hurd? I just want to make sure that I'm going to be able to deposit the check and not have to get it to Texas and get it back from Texas.
We will work out the clerical passing through of the check with you offline, so that we can make sure that we get it done correctly through the controller's office.
Very good. Thank you.
I just have to say, this is a very difficult case for me. I understand that the board is required to approve compensation in this case, but where you have a defendant, or excuse me, a claimant who is serving 4 life sentences, including for a conspiracy that the original charge that was of which he was found factually innocent was in furtherance of. It's just very troubling to me that in this situation we're required to compensate, but I understand that's what we're required to do.
With all due respect, sir, I don't know that that is an accurate rendition of the procedural and factual history here.
Please elaborate.
The conviction in California State Court, Superior Court, was separate and apart from the RICO conviction in the federal case. I don't know how much to go into, to tell you the truth, but that's really the overarching point that I'd like to make. He was convicted of a murder that was charged as a single murder, and he was wrongfully convicted of that. He was not involved in that. The federal RICO case that followed was different.
I understand. What I understood from the proposed decision was that the conspiracy charge, that murder of which he was convicted was found to have been an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy that he was later convicted of.
No, sir, that's inaccurate. It was charged as an overt act. In federal court, the jury does not decide the truth or the falsity of overt acts. The federal jury did not decide the truth or falsity of that charged overt act.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item by the board? I have a motion to approve item 2.
I move to adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Charles Hurd.
I second that motion.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion before the board is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Charles Hurd. Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Johnson,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 3 is a Penal Code Section 4900 claim of Geraldo Cambinelis, sorry for the last name, which will be presented by Chief Counsel Kim Gutierrez.
On November 13th of 2023, Gerardo Cabanillas filed an application as erroneously convicted felon with the Victim Compensation Board. That application was supplemented on November 17th and November 21st of 2023. That application is based on his 1995 and 1996 convictions for robbery, carjacking, kidnapping, and multiple forcible sexual offenses, which convictions were vacated in 2023 pursuant to a writ of habeas corpus. In September of 2023, the court granted a motion for a finding of factual innocence pursuant to Penal Code Section 1485.55. As mandated by the court order and pursuant to that same Penal Code section, the proposed decision recommends compensation in the amount of $1,447,740, which represents $140 per day for each of the 10,341 days that Mr. Cabanillas was wrongfully imprisoned. Throughout these proceedings, Mr. Cabanillas is represented by Jasmine Harris of the Innocence Center. The Office of the Attorney General has been represented by Deputy Attorney General Jessica Leal, and I believe Dina Petroshenko is here to appear on this matter today as well.
Thank you, Council. We'll hear first from Ms. Harris representing Mr. Cabanillas.
Thank you very much. Good morning, board members, Cal VCB staff members, and of course, my colleague at the Attorney General's office. Nice to see you. I'm Jasmine with the Innocence Center, and I'm here with my client, Gerardo Cabanillas. We're grateful today that the state of California recognizes that exonerated people deserve compensation, and we certainly appreciate that you all are here today during the holiday season to facilitate this for Mr. Cabanillas. Mr. Cabanillas spent over 28 years in prison for crimes he did not commit. He was just a child of 18 years old when this nightmare started, and now he's 47 years old. Since he's been home, he started working, is spending time with his loving family and friends, and is looking forward to the upcoming holiday season. No amount of compensation will give Mr. Cabanillas back the decades he has lost, but it's certainly a start to helping him become whole again. We ask that you approve the proposed order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Mr. Cabanillas, would you like to address the board?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabanillas. We'll hear next Ms. Petroshenko from the Attorney General's office.
Yes, thank you again to the board for the invitation to appear. I have read and reviewed the proposed decision. There was some discussion after the administrative record closed and before today's hearing between the parties and the board about the amount of compensation. And if that is not an issue that is being contested any longer by Ms. Harris, then I ask that the board approve the proposed decision as it is now.
Thank you, Ms. Petroshenko. There's one item on that point that it may seem a bit small, but I did want to get the perspective of council on that. The 4 days between the arrest and arraignment. The proposed decision says that Mr. Cabanillas was arrested on a pretext. There was an outstanding traffic warrant, but really he was arrested because the officer suspected him of having committed the crimes that he was ultimately found not to have committed. And so under those circumstances, under the prevailing statutes and regulations, is it the case that those 4 days he would not have been incarcerated, but for the convictions that were ultimately found to be invalid? And should they therefore be compensated? And I would like to hear from Ms. Harris and Ms. Petroshenko on that point. Maybe Ms. Harris, you can start.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that time and thank you for raising this issue. Of course, we believe that Mr. Cabanillas should be compensated for those 4 days. There is no other place that this traffic warrant is alleged in the various AOJs that we have, the probation officer's reports that we have. I did submit to the hearing officer the actual arrest record and the paperwork that Mr. Cabanillas signed regarding his Miranda rights, both dated on January 20th. We do still strongly believe that although Detective Alvarez testified that he arrested Mr. Cabanillas for this traffic warrant, there just has not been any proof of that since this time. Mr. Cabanillas didn't even have a driver's license at the time. And I think just one last thing I'd like to add is, of course, exonerated people remember important dates in their cases. And Mr. Cabanillas remembers that he was arrested on a Friday, January 20th, 1995. It has never left his mind or his heart since that day. And I just appreciate you all asking these additional questions.
Ms. Harris, Ms. Petroshenko?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Ms. Harris's position that Mr. Cabanillas remembers the significant dates, but as an 18-year-old, he was unlikely to understand the particular nuances of which case, which arrest warrant, and which charges he was being detained for. It was a significant event for him. I'll only say that it's Mr. Cabanillas's burden under the regulations of the board and the statute to prove up the injury amount. And my position remains that the hearing officer's decision should be adopted.
If I could just ask a clarification on that point, is it because he might not have been actually arrested until the later date, or because he was arrested on the earlier date, but it was for a valid charge?
The
It
latter.
was not. I see. Okay. Thank you. Is there any, actually, should I ask for a motion first? Or, okay, any discussion on this item by the board? Okay, well, I'll call for a motion on this item.
I move to adopt the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Gerardo Cabanillas.
And I second that motion.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion before the board is adoption of the hearing officer's proposed decision in the Penal Code Section 4900 matter of Gerardo Cabanillas. Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Johnson,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Is there any other business that needs to come before the board today? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move the meeting be adjourned.
Second.
Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Johnson,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody, and best wishes for a happy new year.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.